In June of 2000, a group of teenagers released their debut EP, Death Metal, out into the world. After another EP release got them nowhere, they collectively called it quits. 16 years later, someone found that EP. This story takes us to the music board on 4chan. A user uploads a picture of an album he found in the British charity shop Oxfam. And on July 21st, 2016, he posts this. Hey, I picked this up because it looked interesting. I wasn't able to find any references to it online whatsoever. Even with super obscure bands, you might find some old MySpace page or a mention in some forum. Does anybody recognize the album? They then go on to say that they expected some kind of noise pop or vaporwave sound, but were surprised to hear such a lo-fi shoegaze sound. From the beginning, many people speculated this was a marketing stunt, but the user reassured them that it was not. After a lot of back and forth, the user finally uploaded the version they had, but there was one issue. This upload had massive amounts of distortion and degradation. It suffered from a phenomenon called disc rot. Disc rot is very common in cheaper CDs that aren't preserved properly. The community fell in love with the way this sounded, and it became sort of an indie darling among file-sharing communities. In the liner notes of the EP consisted of the members' names, but there's always a twist. None of their last names were mentioned. All we had was Owain, Andy, Sean, and John. The community had almost nothing to go on, but they persisted. In a weird coincidence, another 4chan user claims he saw this EP in an Oxfam shop in Southampton. Users were quick to contact this shop, but they claimed to never have stalked the item in the first place. Puzzled, a user pointed out the barcode on the front. They noticed it wasn't a UPC, but a gift tag for the shop. This would link another person who physically owned this EP to the search. But British privacy laws prevent any sort of information from being released. An Oxfam employee points out that the last 4 digits of the tag are actually from the store it came from. While searching up Oxfam in those 4 digits, it linked to Sherwood, Nottingham. While this doesn't exactly do much for the search, it does allow the community to realign their search in this area. Knowing that the name Owain isn't particularly popular in that area, they chose that name to start. And lo and behold, the first musician named Owain they contacted had this to say. Hey, are you Owain from Panchiko? Yeah. Stunned, Owain messages Andy and says, have you seen this? Andy responded, bloody hell. There's just one problem. The band didn't have any copies of the EP, and their masters had vanished. Andy had this to say. The EP recording process was a little more tricky 20 years ago. Most of it was hardware-based recording and sampling. A Roland VS840 was used for the multi-tracking and a computer synced, but only used to sequence samples from the hardware, aka S2000 sampler. Owain had lots of gadgets and hardware synths, and samplers too, but all of it was bounced to the VS840, which vanished a long time ago. I will keep asking friends and family for copies and hope that we might be in luck. And eventually someone came through. A friend of mine sent me this photo. I'll try and steal it from him soon. Hopefully the audio is okay. This version features some even more terrible Photoshop work. My apologies on behalf of 17-year-old me. It was eventually remastered and released alongside another EP Andy uncovered titled Kicking Cars and those disc rot versions. If you can believe it, the band initially didn't want to release the clean version because they believed the rot had become part of the experience. It is a very eerie listening experience and I very much recommend it. Now, most lost media stories would just end here. It's a happy ending where we found the artist and everyone wins in the end. But it wasn't done here. Panchiko has a dedicated fan base who wanted more from them, so they decided to release new music. Nearly 20 years to the day of death metal's release, they released their first new single, Machine Gun Drum. The band later released a few more pieces of music in a live EP, and eventually on December 5th of 2021, the band played their first live show in 20 years. And in October of 2022, they toured the US, releasing their debut album, Failed at Maths, just a year later. They managed to keep the charm of their music in modern recording standards, and it's a 10 out of 10 album in my opinion. The internet brought this long since forgotten band back from the dead. to the tune of over 1.2 million monthly listeners. You heard me right, million. They have become a bona fide mainstream act, with many listeners not even knowing their backstory. I had the chance to interview Zod, the owner of the Panchiko Discord server. He was one of the few who were spearheading the search, and one of the first to ever make contact with the band. I asked him, how did it feel to be part of a small community who so desperately searched for years to find something, and that moment finally paying off into the Panchiko we know today? He responded, "It felt nice being part of such a niche, tight-knit community. The search at the start was uneventful, with all initial leads being dead ends. But once we tracked down the exact location of the Oxfam shop the CD was sold at, it was easy sailing." How do you respond to the persistent claims that this was all just a viral marketing stunt? Most claims about it being a stunt have flimsy at best evidence, so it's not a huge deal unless it's a big influencer spreading misinformation. Though it is annoying to have to deal with people who know nothing about the story but think they've cracked the code, join the Discord, and proceed to fill up the chat with their hoax theories that have all been disproven time and time again, it's less of a personal issue and more of a managerial gripe for me. Yeah, I've never bought into those theories. Lastly, what about Panchiko's music do you think truly captivates over 1 million people every month? To me, it's the mix of the late 90s, early 2000s trip-hoppy alt-rock style that's been getting more and more popular with the whole Y2 craze that's become a thing as of recent. I think as well as the lo-fi sound of death metal brings an almost nostalgic feel to the table. Same way bands like Duster capture that essence in a more melancholic way. I also just think that the music's neat and it got a chance to be put on the spotlight, so it was able to gain traction. He provided some great insight on a very interesting story, so I have to personally thank Zod for his time. Panchiko is a testament to hyperfixation itself. Something that is usually shamed as being obsessive or weird can actually be beautiful. We as a collective unit found a band that was doomed for obscurity for the rest of time, but we resurrected them. And those 4 guys are now living out those teenage dreams of being touring musicians and having the time of their life. And at the end of the day, I find it so beautiful. I appreciate your time. I'm Jordy2X. Peace and love, y'all.